not use all of my acronyms in one place. And hopefully you also say, wow, that's a really cool thing that's happening in my own backyard, and I'd like to get involved in that. So I'm going to do a little bit of sampling of the kind of conservation work that Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife does, and hopefully you find it interesting. I think we're going to hold questions until the end, if that's okay, just so that we sort of get some flow and I can get it all in, and then we'll have lots of time for questions. My contact information will also be here. Please feel free to reach out to me individually if you like. I email or phone call or whatever you like is great. And of course, we have some lovely biologists that work here in the region who also like to do this sort of thing and are great at answering questions as well. So are you ready for the hit presentation?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to try to do this. We'll see.
The green one.
I know, I'm looking. Where is it?
The green one at the bottom.
Got it. Here we go. Okay.
Good job.
Thank you. Can you confirm online that you all are seeing the presentation? Sound good? Okay. I'm going to just go ahead and just get right on into it. I think we've had I'm going to try to stand behind the podium so that I'm not walking around, even though I get kind of antsy and I get really excited because I love my work. Okay, come on, forward, please. What's happening? Curses. One moment, please. Your state wildlife action plan coordinator will be with you in a minute, perhaps. There we go. Okay, that's good. Maybe. Okay, now we have all the keys at the bottom. So most of the things that I'm going to present today are things that the wildlife diversity or the non-game program does across the state. I didn't stick to Eastern Washington and I didn't stick to birds, although this is a bird emphasized program. Let's just say that. So I thought you might be interested to see some of the neat bits and pieces of all of the kinds of work that we do through our non-game program. And please know there are so many other things that happen in the game program, in the habitat program, in our communications division, in our legislative arena, all of those things that go on throughout the whole year. And so this is just a small sampling of the kinds of things that we do. So most of the non-game program is subdivided into 3 big bins. Survey and monitoring, where we count stuff so that we get to know stuff. We also do planning. That's what I do. I'm a conservation planner, so that we can take all the stuff that we've counted and we've monitored and we know about, and we can put it into plans so that we can work with our partners to figure out what to do on the ground. And then we do stuff. So our whole intention in that program is to prevent at-risk species from becoming more at risk, to prevent the need for listing under the Endangered Species Act or under the state protections, if possible. And when things do get listed, then we spend a lot of time and effort. We put a lot of expertise behind it. We put a lot of resources behind it, and we work to move the needle closer to sustainable, persistent populations and connected habitats. And we do our best. And we do not do it alone. Our partners are the most important people that we work with. And you all are part of that. So usually these presentations, they always leave the, what can you do at the very end? Because you've been inspired by all the things that you're going to say. And now you want to go out and do stuff. You're already doing stuff. Spokane Audubon is really, really active in the conservation realm. And a couple of the things that I'm just going to throw up here for the report wildlife observations. I know you're using eBird. I know you're using eBird Northwest. I've given that presentation before, and I hope you're using eBird Northwest. And you can also report your wildlife observations to WDFW. Those things get put directly into our database. We use that for conservation and management action planning. So it's really helpful for us because our biologists can't be everywhere at once. And of course, volunteer. So a couple of sample projects from the community science realm and from the volunteer realm. I don't know, how many of you all participated in the short-eared owl community science project just a year or two ago? Oh, you missed an opportunity. There was some really great stuff going on. Maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago, maybe. But it was really great. It was all the Western states, a bunch of volunteers that were organized by the Klamath Bird Observatory and by the state fish and wildlife agencies in every state. And we got a ton of information about this very interesting species that has a very mobile range throughout the West. And I should say, you can look all of this stuff up on our website and get more information, or you can ask me about it and I can send you links, either one. We still have a very active bumblebee conservation project going on through the Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas. That's a bunch of community scientists engaged. This little graphic here of 276 participants, that was just a year and a half ago. And so we have more than that now. I'd say it's probably closer to 300. Almost all of the cells in Washington have been adopted. So we have some great participation there. And it's really fun because you get to follow little cute little bumblebees around and look at them in little jars and take pictures. And then you don't even have to identify them. You can just send them in on your data sheet and other people identify them, which is super cool. See, I think we're making progress. There we go. No. Try again. So one of the other improvements that we've made in our volunteer program at WDFW is more along the lines of bringing in the folks who want to do good things with plants and animals to the folks who want to do the restoration work on the ground. And Scattered Creek Wildlife Area, which is over on the west side outside of Olympia in Thurston County, has had some really great volunteers over the course of time. And we're starting to really consolidate that program around that wildlife area. I know in a lot of our regional wildlife area complexes are also starting to do that with their wildlife area management plans. And so you might check in with your local wildlife area and see if they are also working on consolidating their volunteer program into their restoration and management program. We get a lot of really great work done. We were doing prescribed fire, we were doing reseeding, we were doing seed collection for restoration. And please stop doing that. And we also had folks who were going out and looking at those restoration areas for the listed species that we have out in that area. Taylor's checker spot butterflies, streaked horned larks, Mazama pocket gophers, Mardon skipper butterflies, and helping us document the effectiveness of that restoration work. So one of the things that I hear from my colleagues all the time is conservation is hard. We don't get into this work because it pays super well. We don't get into it because we're super famous. And most of the time, we don't even see the progress or the impact of our work, even in our whole career. We might see a little bit of progress. We might see a little move the needle here and there, but we rarely get to see something like completely recovered. We did such a great job. So we like to find our silver linings. One of our biologists from down in the Klickitat area sent me this photo, and these are some turtles who are finding a silver lining over a deer carcass that ended up in the water. We find better silver linings than that, silver linings that are not stinky. So some of the things that we deal with in our division are also wildlife diseases. And you've probably heard a lot about the high path or highly pathogenic avian flu. And that's very different than some of the other avian flu outbreaks that we've seen in the past. This is more in the wild bird population. We have seen a total of almost 1,600 lost Caspian terns on one breeding colony out at Rat Island with a super intensive, not just labor intensive, but emotionally intensive, hazmat suit intensive cleanup. And our vets are directly connected into the national network that is working on figuring out where we go with this information, how we're collecting the information, where we go with this information, and how we can get the word out to preserve those populations that have not been affected. So that's our silver lining, is that yes, it was horrible and terrible and bad, but we learned so much just out of this one event. We also have rabbit hemorrhagic disease that has shown up on the west side. Fortunately, we have a vaccine now for rabbit hemorrhagic disease, and we are working closely with veterinarians and volunteers and our biologists to vaccinate our little pygmy rabbits that we're working on recovery. And it's going great. I saw Bee's face. Bee was like, what? So, but it's going great. We're able to actually capture all of the rabbits that are in our breeding enclosures. We are vaccinating wild rabbits also, because we now have wild rabbit populations, which means we are making recovery progress. We have Colombian white-tailed deer. We do not have chronic wasting disease in that listed species population. We now have early planning so that we have a response plan to prevent that from happening and to respond appropriately when it does, if it does ever happen. So we've got folks who are working across state boundaries, across agencies, with veterinarians, with USDA, to make sure that we've got good plans in place and good resources in place. Speaking, I think my slideshow must be on autopilot here. Sorry about that. I don't know how to turn that off either, so I'll talk faster. So anyway, all of that to say that yes, there are some really hard things that we do in conservation, but all of those hard things teach us good things that we can apply and make good progress toward the recovery of these species. All of us who do what I do are very optimistic. We're not carefree about that, but we are very optimistic. We know that there are places where we can make good things happen. So I'm going to skip a rock real fast over some highlights from the last 2 years, I think. So I wanted to call attention to this. We have made huge progress on our periodic status reviews. There's a great website that you can go to see all of the periodic status reviews that are coming up. There are a number of birds in that list, so you might want to pay attention to that if you're interested in making comments. These reviews are places where our biologists every 5 years update the current status of information and promote and make a recommendation to the commission about whether or not a species should be listed, remain listed, be provided other protections under our laws or not. So this is a good spot for you to go if you're interested in engaging in that kind of regulatory realm. We are sampling alpine streamflies. What are alpine streamflies? Caddisfly larvae and mayfly larvae and things like that occur in these super high alpine areas to learn more about how climate change is affecting our alpine habitats, which will also help us understand more about those alpine habitats that are important for other species like white-tailed ptarmigan. Washington ground squirrels, yes, we've seen some dramatic declines, but we are also, because we have put some extra resources and we have some great volunteers, we're finding new areas where we did not have locations, historic locations, so that we can do better protection of those areas and we can understand more about habitat restoration for the places where our ground squirrels have winked out. We have a really great partnership for northern leopard frogs down in the Columbia Basin wildlife area and National Wildlife Refuge. I don't know if you all have been down Potholes, that's Potholes area, right? We have a number of folks who are doing captive rearing for us for northern leopard frogs. Their frogs are so tiny, they're so cute. Oh my God, they're so cute. And they do releases every August. And we have released almost 1,500. By my slide's a little outdated because I didn't have the 2023 numbers this morning. But we have almost 1,500 released at the refuge, and we are learning more about the impacts of bullfrogs on those little guys. So we're paying a little more attention to bullfrog management. Bullfrogs are a non-native invasive species. Columbian sharp-tailed grouse, we have done a number of translocation, trapping and translocation projects. Our biologists from the east side of the Cascades predominantly participating in that. Going over to BC, it's a ton of collaboration, a lot of permitting, massive amounts of logistics. And those 40 birds are super happy, let me just tell you. They make it all the way across the border. They're released Scotch Creek, Chunk Valley in that area. And we have some really cool new GPS collars that we're using to track their movements. And we're learning more about how grouse move when they're moved. So we can make our translocation projects better. White-headed woodpeckers, we still have an ongoing survey at the Rocky Reach Wildlife Area. I have in here hashtag goals. Still looking for breeding pairs so that we can locate their nests and analyze their nesting, their nest site characteristics. So not just the habitat of the nest tree and where they are, but the entire complex that surrounds that area, so that we can understand our landscape management and our habitat management at those wildlife areas to benefit these species. So if you have records, send them in, report wildlife observations. And then of course, sharp-tailed grouse, sage grouse, you probably know more about sage grouse than I know about sage grouse. There's a lot of activity in the sage grouse realm. We work at international and national workshop scales. We work with partners all across the West on sage grouse. Still working on, we have a new grouse coordinator in Washington for WDFW, and he's doing a great job pulling together more of a tightly focused science team to help us figure out our conservation actions and be able to make those things real on the ground. I think we've done a lot of planning and a lot of talking and a lot of surveying, a lot of monitoring in the past, and now he's taking all of that great information and putting it into more action-oriented recovery work. So I hope if you're interested in sage grouse and you're interested in what's going on with WDFW and our partners with sage grouse and sharp-tailed grouse, there's a meeting November 14th and 15th at Central Washington University. You're going to have this presentation. So you'll be able to look through here and get this information if you would like it. So sort of on the other end of the spectrum, you know, birds get a lot of attention. Cute little torrent salamanders, while they are cute, don't get that much attention. One thing that happened in this last year was U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service decided that they were going to do a species status assessment, an SSA, on torrent salamanders. And so they didn't have any data. So they turned to WDFW and they said, what do you know about torrent salamanders? And we were able to say, well, it just so happens that we have some people who are keen on salamanders in our organization. And they've been doing some habitat work in talus slopes to understand talus slopes and springs and the connected waters associated with those springs. So fish program and habitat program and wildlife program got together, and we were able to provide a little information, which is better than no information, but we were able to provide a little information about torrent salamanders to inform the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service status assessment. And we had some really good news with northwestern pond turtles in the last couple of years. We actually have more than one new wild recruit, which is great. We've been doing a ton of captive breeding and releases for this little turtle. And shell disease is a big deal with these guys. So we've been doing treatments for the shell disease, and we finally got some wild nests with wild babies. So yay, we're making progress. What did I say? I'm an optimist. 1 is better than 0. I'm just saying. 1 is better than 0. I don't know why it's not going. There we go. You may have heard about our Fisher work. Cool little giant weasel, the Fisher. We've been doing reintroductions in Olympic National Park and the Olympic Peninsula on Forest Service land. We've been doing reintroductions on Forest Service land down in the South Cascades, and did a big giant monitoring program this last year to determine how effective our releases were. So those releases, you probably have seen online, you know, a bunch of kids standing around a box, and Jeff Lewis, our mammologist, opening the box, and the fish were like gone, right? So we got detections on almost all of the cameras that we put out in the right places where we thought fishers should be. And so that data analysis is going on right now. More fishers than we anticipated, which is absolutely great. And now we're moving our monitoring up to the North Cascades in the next year. Island marble butterfly. There's one occupied site in the state on San Juan Island on a national park. And they are using an invasive mustard as their host plant because their native plants no longer exist in that area. We have learned a lot in the last 5 or 7 years about island marble butterflies. We put out a candidate conservation agreement with assurances to engage private landowners to develop and maintain habitat patches. We now have occupancy of island marble butterfly on these habitat patches. So we're learning what attracts a butterfly, what attracts an island marble butterfly to fly from one place to another to lay its eggs. Can we get them interested in the native plants that they're supposed to be interested in? How much of that genetic memory is associated with the non-native species of plants? So we're learning a lot, and we're improving our captive rearing strategy and facilities so that hopefully we have while we still have a long road ahead of us, we can make more progress on that particular butterfly's recovery. There's a big lynx project. We're doing a home range study, and while one of the lynx that was collared was detected dead, it was a female, and those are hard to come by. What we did note when we did the autopsy was she had contributed 4 kits to the world. So thank you, lynx, for doing that. And we're going to get the analysis out of that in the next year as well. We now have a bumblebee protection strategy for the state of Washington that came out of the Bumblebee Atlas. So all of that great data that citizen scientists, community science collected for us, we were able to put into practice to create some guidelines for doing restoration. We're going to be putting this on our wildlife management areas through our restoration practices. Cascade red fox, while it was just listed this last year, state listed this last year, that listing generated some keen interest and partnership with the Yakima Nation that we did not have in the past. So the Cascade Carnivore Project, which is an NGO, a non-governmental organization, the Yakima Nation, and WDFW technical support. We're working on a partnership to do more monitoring of this particular fox to understand its distribution so that we can do more protection and management, forest management, to benefit this particular species. Taylor's checker spot butterfly. boy, this poor little guy, we thought we were in good stead. We've got a captive rearing and release program that's been going for almost 20 years now, with tons, paired with tons of habitat restoration in South Sound on the west side. This last year and the year before, climate change is doing a number on us. We've had snow that persisted longer than it should have, and deeper than it should have for South Sound. We had, and inappropriately timed for South Sound. We have had drought and heat domes and all of those things that are fairly unusual for the west side. And we have populations now that we had felt were fairly stable and restored that are now starting to wink. So we've sort of pulled our eyeballs up off of the ground out of these individual sites, and we're looking more at the landscape on the Olympic Peninsula and South Sound. And we now have a stronger captive rearing program. We have a recovery working group for the Olympic Peninsula so that we can have multiple sites across its historic range. And we are, I think we got something along the lines of $570,000 out of DOD, Department of Defense and JBLM to be able to work on Taylor's checker spot butterfly habitat restoration and reintroduction in the course of the next 5 years. So we're going to come back from our little blip, and we're going to figure out more about how climate change adversely affects this butterfly. Bullfrogs, they're a problem. They eat a lot of things that we care about. They eat a lot of things that we're trying to recover, like northwestern pond turtles and Oregon spotted frogs and northern leopard frogs. But we've got an interesting eDNA project with Washington State University to help us understand whether our suppression efforts are being effective. Like, you can't see all the bullfrogs, right? But you can go out there and you can trap bullfrogs and you can remove bullfrogs and you can think you've got them all because you're not hearing them, because not all life stages call. So we're using eDNA to monitor some of these ponds where we've had significant removal efforts so that we can track whether or not we've been effective in those places to benefit northwestern pond turtles and Oregon spotted frogs. It's been kind of a cool project. We've learned a lot. And it also gives us an early warning signal that we need to go back in and do some more work in that space. We got the legislature to pay a little attention to us about bullfrogs. They provided a little bit of money. We did some creative fencing for a northern leopard frog project to keep bullfrogs out. That effort raised a flag with the America the Beautiful Grant Challenge and Western States, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service science application, and several Western states got together. We crafted a proposal. We think we're going to get about $750,000 to do best practices workshops throughout Western states and British Columbia. We've been working with British Columbia on northern leopard frog conservation bullfrogs for a long time. And so this helps bring all of that community of practice together to get best practices on the ground. Where should you be doing it first? How can you get more traction in bullfrog management for particular things? And we just got a new aquatic invasive species policy person at WDFW who isn't just focused on zebra mussels and green crabs, which are very important things to focus on, but not just focused on those things that we have been focused on in the past. He's also keenly interested in the things that are adversely affecting our recovery efforts, our conservation actions, and he wants to help remove barriers for us. So I'm pretty excited about that. We've got a lot of good traction on ferruginous hawk in the last year. Although our status review, we did end up putting that bird on the list. We are doing more outreach to pay more attention to things beyond the nest, right? So ferruginous hawks can't be conserved if the only thing that you're conserving is the nest. We have a lot of great literature that tells us that we're looking at a 7 to 9 mile buffer around a nest site if you really want to do good hawk conservation. We've had a lot of hard conversations with the solar development community in the last 2 years around setbacks from and impacts to ferruginous hawk nesting territories. And because we don't have ferruginous hawks in all of the places where we used to have ferruginous hawks, we want to conserve the opportunity to recover that species. So just because a nest site is not occupied right now, it's still very important to us. So that's an interesting conversation to try to have with somebody who says, there's no hawk there. Why do you want me to buffer that by 7 to 9 miles? So we're having some good conversations. Let's just say that. I think we're getting some traction. So I think that's good too. We're close. We're really, really close. Oregon silver spot butterfly, we just got a ton of money to do some habitat restoration. There's a great reintroduction project and restoration project going on down in Oregon, and we are bringing those best practices up to Washington. We've got a wildlife area that has great potential. And so we're working on some habitat restoration on that wildlife area so that we can eventually work with the Willapa National Wildlife Refuge and our wildlife area to reintroduce that butterfly to Washington where it had been previously extirpated. That's probably like a 10-year plan, maybe longer, but we're making progress. So marble murrelet conservation strategy is coming, we think. Oops, there we go. The Pacific Seabirds Working Group, I don't know if you all know much about that working group, but they did a big survey review. How effective are the surveys that we do under forest practices at marble murrelet detection? So they did a big review of that process, and they have come up with some new guidelines for surveys for marble murrelets. And they're also putting together a habitat document that brings in the current science. I mean, the marble murrelet survey protocols under forest practices are 20 years old, right? And there's a lot of work that's been done on marble murrelets since then. And we also know more about what marble murrelets need at sea and on land and how complex their life history is. So there's some very interesting conversations that are going to happen over the course of the next 5 or 6 years about marble murrelet surveys and how that works with and affects the forest practices realm, the rulemaking, the surveys, and things like that. Pygmy rabbits, I think I already mentioned this. We're doing good stuff. We're doing good stuff for pygmy rabbits. They're darn cute. Everybody loves them. They're in the news all the time. You want to know more about them, you can look it up. So I love them. I love them. But they get plenty of love. They get plenty of love in the media. We have a lot of work going on right now about wildfire response. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. So we do a lot of things that aren't just species focused. We do a ton of habitat restoration. We do a lot of landscape work, and we have a number of significant partnerships. I think I have 3 or 4 to just highlight here. And these are not all the ones. In the last 2 years, we worked very closely with our partners and a bunch of biologists all across the Columbia Basin to identify which species and what data we could provide to the Washington State University least conflict solar siting process. And we've also contributed to the Audubon solar siting process and been partners in that working group. I think it's a working group. So the document and the product that came out of the WSU conversations and workshops just came out in June of this year, and it is online if you're interested in looking. WDFW came out and said the species that occur in this landscape is imperiled. The species that occur on this landscape are imperiled. They might not be listed under the state or federal regulatory realm, but they are imperiled because the habitat is imperiled. And we put all of it. We put every single bit of it up for this product. And we said, we're not gonna rank it. We're not gonna say a bird or a snake or a rabbit is more important than anything else. And we're not gonna say layers are more important than single observations and isolated populations. So for this product, we said it's all important and we're putting it on there. So I was like, oh my God, I love our director. I didn't think that was really gonna happen, but we made a good case. So yeah, it worked. We've got a ton of grants going on in prairie habitat restoration. And I think we think about prairie habitat restoration as maybe being the Palouse or South Sound prairies, and then it's a pretty tight sort of thing. But this group is looking at prairies at a bigger, broader scale. So we have prairies that occur all the way down into Lewis County and all the way up into the San Juan Islands. There are prairies that occur throughout the Palouse and other places. And so this group is looking, and we have about 4 or 5 big grants going right now. They're specifically targeting habitat management for species of greatest conservation need. So not just targeting counting butterflies or counting birds or counting things, but actually doing the work for the habitat to make the habitat ready for recovery actions for those species. And we have a new landowner services division, which is kind of a cool thing. I personally call this the conservation conversation group, because what they do is they talk to people. They talk to people all the time. And they talk to audiences that we don't normally get to talk to because we're, focused on our wildlife area, or we're focused on endangered species, or we're focused in this, landscape scale cooperative or this working group. But these folks are going out and they are knocking on gates and doors and making relationships, and they are making inroads in places where we have not necessarily done a very good job of doing that kind of outreach. And they're bringing incentives with them for private landowners. And they're also, once they're in that conversation, they're able to say, hey, did you know there are these other things? Are you interested in these other things? There are these other species that we care about in this area. Are you interested in that? One conversation this last year led to the sign up of one more big landowner under the Pygmy Rabbit Safe Harbor Agreement, which is amazing. We didn't know that there were wild rabbits in that place. She said, yeah, I love rabbits. Why don't you come out and take a look? Okay, found new rabbits. And we got her some regulatory protection through the Safe Harbor Agreement. So it's just a fabulous thing to have these biologists who live and work in the community. That's where the real work happens. I only have 2 more slides, aren't you glad? So the Washington Shrub Steppe Restoration and Resiliency Initiative is a big effort, predominantly around making landscapes and habitats more resilient in the face of wildfire and climate change. It has a lot of species significance. So the sagebrush songbirds work that you all did, and a number of the other Eastern Washington Audubon chapters did, that's rolling up into some of these data products that are informing the priorities where we want to do these wildfire restoration and resiliency projects. There's a lot to this. There's a lot of outreach with fire districts and Department of Natural Resources and biologists and tribes and other conservation partners. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you kind of like play around in that website. And if you have questions, there's some good contact information there too. That's a legislative proviso funded effort, and the funding is now permanent. So it will continue every single year, well, until the legislature changes their mind, but it will continue every single year and provide some stability in funding in this kind of work, which we have not had in the past. And then we have the State Wildlife Action Plan. That's my job. Our review and revision is due in 2 years, pretty much from a couple of weeks ago, 2 years from a couple of weeks ago. And I'll be working over the course of the next year to garner public input around the species and habitats and systems and landscapes that we think are important in Washington, how we want to talk about them in this plan, and how we want to make that information available to folks who could really use it on the ground to get good things done. So stay tuned on that one. I'm done. Yeah. So please feel free to reach out. This is just a sampling. There's so much other really, really good work going on in the department, and with our partners, we have fabulous folks who drive a lot of work on the ground, and I'm constantly impressed. When I sit down to do these kinds of presentations, I'm like, oh, but I could put 30 more slides in there. But yeah. But thank you. Donna.
Wendy, our chapter recently signed on to with the other Audubon chapters, a petition. Whoops. Our chapter recently signed on, along with other Audubon chapters, a petition to the director to have burrowing owls be a species of concern. And I wondered with your update on the State Wildlife Action Plan, if you know if that's in the offing or where that species stands in the list of species of greatest conservation need.
Does this, yeah, this works with that. Okay. I would say that burrowing owls have been on our radar for conservation for a very long time. They're definitely a species of greatest conservation need as far as our biologists and at headquarters and in the region are concerned. We have more information now than we had 10 years ago when we wrote our last plan. So I would say that's definitely a possibility. I would say that the State Wildlife Action Plan and the species of greatest conservation need list is very different than a formal status review and a listing process. So the species of greatest conservation need, while there are listed species on that list, it's a collector. It's a communication tool to say, these things we should all be working on because they are the highest priority, but it is not a regulatory status. So, oh, thank you. I didn't know there was a thing. So does that help answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay.
Real quick. Yeah, a real quick comment for everybody. Our January program will be on burrowing owls, so we'll be able to, take a deeper dive into that. But that should be very fun.
We have a lot of actions on the ground around burrowing owls, even though they're not officially listed right now.
So I have a couple questions. How do you tell like that the lynx you had it tagged? How did you know that she gave birth to cats? Like, how do you monitor that? So
that was from the autopsy. So she had scars. I don't know the exact term. I'm not a mom myself, so I don't know how that works. But she had scars in her uterus, and the autopsy revealed that she had 4 kids.
Oh, okay, cool. That's interesting. And then question, so with the frogs, what happens to them in the winter? Do they die off and then they just the eggs come back in the spring? The eggs hatch, is that how they survive winters?
Some frogs go into the mud and they go subterranean. I'm sure there's some mortality in the winter, but a lot of the frogs, like northern leopard frogs, they can persist under the edge of the ice and with snow in eastern Washington at the potholes. And they come back the next spring and they start calling and they make eggs and they make babies. So the eggs hatch and make babies,
Yeah.
I should say.
And I'm really interested in the conservation work that your agency does, and it's kind of new territory for me. Like, if I want to know more about what you guys do, like, is it on your websites?
It is.
And what would that website be?
Oh, sure. What is our website? Wow. Google Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Yeah, I think I could probably send you to our homepage, but the
I think it's wdfw.wa.gov.
yes,
I used to work for him.
yes,
so.
you did. Madonna was our communications guru, so she's the right person.
Now she's ours.
I never give out the website. I just tell people to Google it because you're gonna Google the thing that you care about the most, right? So, yeah.
That works. And can I just, one last comment? So, I live out towards Reardon and I see a lot of roadkill and it makes me pretty sad. And, you know, I know that there's efforts to do like the wildlife bridges,
Mhm.
which I think is awesome. And do you know of more of those in the works?
I do. There's an analysis going on right now for pretty much south of Thurston County, all the way down to the Columbia, to figure out where there are needs and opportunities for a big wildlife crossing like they have over I-90. And so that, I don't know when that analysis is supposed to be finished, but they don't want to lose the opportunity. Like they have to have the right kinds of habitats on either end of the bridge so that the animals have someplace to go when they come off the bridge. They can't come off the bridge into somebody's, neighborhood or a small park or something like that. So they're looking at large forested landscapes that are well connected or could be well connected by a corridor bridge. Yeah, I think so too. I think there are very few opportunities in southwestern Washington, and the Washington Department of Transportation and Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and DNR, Department of Natural Resources, are all looking into that. Yes. Yeah.
I'm wondering if, I know turkeys were introduced, I believe, by Fish and Wildlife. Is there any talk of considering them an invasive species now?
I don't know.
I'm voting yes. And I was told by someone who thought they knew something that they are really detrimental to grouse. That they in fact eat when they discover the eggs, nests of grouse, that they eat the eggs. And that they're eating, excuse me, little amphibians and anything they can find, they eat. And now they've certainly invaded Spokane city limits,
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm just wondering about that. if
Okay.
there's any,
Well, I tell you what, I will take your question back for our turkey biologist and our grouse biologist, and I will ask both of them the same question and
Thank
see
you.
what happens. So if you'll leave your contact information, maybe back there with Madonna, and I'll see what kind of answer I can get for you,
Okay.
because I don't know.
There were a couple of questions online that were also answered online. One was the pygmy rabbits recovered from the 2020 fire. And the answer was given that no, the areas that burn will take decades to recover the sagebrush to the density and maturity that they need.
That's
However, it's my understanding that they're doing okay in the areas that did not burn.
That's true.
Okay, and then someone else asked about what's eDNA, which is environmental DNA.
Environmental DNA. So I'm gonna try to explain it. So researchers can collect samples of live animals or dead animals for that matter, like certain fish. Let's just say they go out and they seine a pond and they get 3 or 4 different species of fish. they extract, they go back to the lab, they do their little blender thing, and they extract the DNA from those fish. And then they have a signature. They understand the DNA signature for that particular fish. So they do this individually. So then when they go out and they sample the water, they can use the water sample and run it through their testing to detect whether or not they have the same signature for the particular species that they, if they've done that particular species. So you can't just go out and collect a sample of water and run it through the testing and get whatever's there if you haven't already created and understood what the DNA signature from the species that could be present. Does that make sense? Okay.
So that's what you're doing with bullfrogs.
Yes, yes. For northwestern pond turtles, we've had probably 10 plus years, maybe I should say 10 years of concerted effort in certain ponds down in southwestern Washington for bullfrog removal to benefit the northwestern pond turtle and the little hatchlings, because little hatchlings apparently are tasty, delicious treats for bullfrogs. So in order to remove that threat, we have had a contractor and some volunteers who go into these ponds, and they have been every single year, all life stages, tadpoles to adults, calling, not calling, removing bullfrogs. And we thought we had done a really, really good job, and we needed some confirmation. We weren't hearing bullfrogs, but we still didn't know if we had other life stages. Tadpoles were non-calling life stages. So we used some eDNA work to figure that out. And they had a detection last year. So they got the contractor and the volunteers back out there. They did a concerted effort, and they removed another 3 bullfrogs and a bunch of tadpoles. So I think we've got some good results from that to help us as an early warning system. It's not pleasant work. You know, I mean, people who care about frogs, we care about northern leopard frogs, and we like frogs. So it's not like we hate bullfrogs. We just don't need them in those spaces, and they're not supposed to be in that space.
My question was about the deer. What was it that the disease that they had? I've heard about that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And is it safe? I've heard about hunters knowing about that. And are you not supposed to eat those deer that have that disease?
So Columbian white-tailed deer do not have chronic wasting disease. It has not been detected in their population. I don't know that much about it. We have a huge website on chronic wasting disease and where it's been detected, sort of a live running page for where it's been detected in the state and how WDFW will respond where it's detected and all of that. So I don't know that much about it. That's more of the game realm. So sure.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
How is it that you guys and you, Wendy, are from Texas and you don't have that accent?